Hello, Lynne Watts here with Wyatt the Wonder Dog books. And today I want to continue talking about the power of storytelling and how helpful that can be whenever you are teaching students to be problem solvers, whenever you're helping them with various counseling issues. It is just a wonderful therapeutic technique. And it's very simple that anybody could do. So you can use it as a counselor, as an educator, as a parent, as a grandparent. This is something that you can do to enhance the power of any story that you're sharing with a young child. So today I'm going to use a couple of my books as examples, and I'm going to show you 5 different things that you can do given any particular story to help students draw out of that story a lesson for their own life. So I'm going to begin with Wyatt the Wonder Dog learns about listening. Certainly something that there are numerous books on, and that is often something that adults feel like children don't do very well. Of course, the fact of the matter is most of us as adults are not great at listening either. So all of these things are useful for not only children, but adults. That's pretty much true of counseling in general. So we're going to talk about the first thing that you can do is that you simply begin by showing a student the cover of the book, tell them the title of the book, and then have them predict what they think is going to happen in the book. So if this is a story about listening, you might ask the child, so what do you think is going to happen in this book? Is he a good listener or is he going to be a bad listener? If he's a good listener, what does that mean? What's that going to look like? If he's not a very good listener, what is that going to look like? So you're predicting what might happen in the book. You're getting, first of all, some insight into what's going on with the child, what they think good listening is or not. But in addition to that, you're engaging them in the story. So you're getting them involved so that they have sort of a buy-in right from the beginning in terms of what is going to happen. Then you can read through the story. And in this particular story about listening, Wyatt does begin having some problems with listening. He has several different situations where he doesn't quite get things right. He doesn't know he needs to bring something in for show and tell. He shows up at a costume party and he's not in a costume because he didn't listen to instructions for that. And so he, encounters several situations where he's having problems due to not listening. And so then comes another opportunity, of course, to suggest to the student, what do you think he should do about it? Obviously, this is a problem. So you can ask, what do you think he should do next? How can he solve this problem? Another thing that you can do is you can help students identify feelings. So you might say, how do you think he feels after that? How does it feel to show up at a party and not have a costume, or to show up at school and not bring in your item for show and tell, and to not get to do that? So you can talk about it that way. And then what happens in the book is Wyatt begins talking with his coach. He has a baseball coach. He's on a baseball team. And his coach starts giving him some ideas about how he can practice being a good listener. So the beauty of this is more than just saying, so you need to listen, but it has some strategies for what does that look like and how do you go about doing that. So this is a point where in a story, again, you can pause and you can ask some reflective questions. You can say, what do you think would help the main character in the story? What would you try if you were in that situation? And then you can continue reading the story, which, of course, in this story, he gets quite a few ideas about what he can do to help him be a better listener. It includes everything from being quiet and not talking while somebody's talking to him, to focusing on the person that's talking, and so on. At that point, then you can start connecting the story to real life. All right. So let me switch to a different book just to give you another example of how this can be used. This book is about Wyatt learns to be organized. And in this story, as you might imagine, he has a problem with being organized. So he has several situations where he almost misses the bus. He doesn't have his homework. And again, he has somebody who starts suggesting to him some things that he can do to help him get better organized. Now, how would you begin connecting this to real life? That's when you can say to the child, so has any of this ever happened to you? How organized do you think you are? Have you ever been late for school, for a bus, for, an appointment, a play date? Have you ever forgotten something? And then you can begin coming up with strategies for what do you think Wyatt ought to do in this situation. So the beauty of a story is that you can do both things at once. In other words, you can keep it the problem far enough away from the child that they can talk about it objectively and it doesn't feel quite so personal. It doesn't feel like I've made a mistake so much as there's a character who's making a mistake. Then you can take that information and you can pull it in closer to the child so that they begin to learn that, hey, there's a solution to this problem. I can see it in the story, but I can also apply it to my own life. And it becomes more personal, but without being threatening, without getting the child in a defensive posture where they say, I'm doing the best I can. I can't learn anything new. And on the other hand, they learn that it is possible to learn some simple techniques that will make a difference in their life. All right. So far we've got pause and predict what's going to happen. We've got reflective questions. We've got connecting the story to real life. The fourth thing that you can do to really take a story home and approach a lesson home is to do one of two things at the end. One is you can have the student role play. So you might say, now let's practice this. I'm going to tell you about something. I want you to listen and see if you can tell me what I just said, or if you can come up with the key points. So you can role play it with them. You can certainly do that as an adult. If you're teaching a whole class, you can pair students up and you can have one student, you probably did this in some of your counseling classes, have one student talk about something while the other student listens and then have them reflect back what they heard. So that's a good way to practice listening. You can obviously role play all kinds of situations. And then the final thing that you can do is you can have students journal, assuming they're an older student who's able to write, or they could draw what they've learned from the story. So that not only helps them learn something from the story and remember it, but it gives them something they can always look back on. Whether that's a drawing that they could put up on the wall as a reminder, whether it's a checklist of things they might do to be organized, or whatever they have gotten from the story. So those are 5 ways that you can take a story, any story, and turn it into a very meaningful lesson. And at the same time, it's not preachy. It's not like giving a student a lecture. It is drawing them into the story, having them participate in the solution to the problem, and then showing them how they can apply that to their life. That is the power of stories. So as always, thanks so much for all you do with young children, and thanks so much for listening.